Welcome to the MetaView podcast. Here, these non-fungible conversations, they will yield you great knowledge and perspective. But beware, they might also make your brain go boom. So watch your step, because this rabbit hole goes deep. Good luck and have fun.
Luke, welcome to the MetaView podcast. It's good to have you here finally.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
You want to tell us a bit about yourself for the people who don't know you yet?
Yeah, definitely. So people on Twitter may know me as LuukDAO. I've been obsessed with DAOs for the past almost 4 years now. I was born in the Caribbean on Curaçao, a small island. Grew up there. About 6, 7 years ago, moved to the Netherlands. Have a background in business administration and philosophy. It's in that intersection as well where DAOs made so much sense for me, where I was looking for more of a purpose in business. That's why I started to also do philosophy, which was again sometimes too abstract, where it wasn't tangible, not something I could really do. It's just thinking about better things, but not being able to build them. And then when I first heard about DAOs, it all kind of came together where I realized that I cannot only think of better futures or more ethical designs, but also actively build them as a business. So I think I somewhat tried to embody that mindset as well, of the combination of philosophical thinking, kind of thinking out better things, and then also shouldering it with the business side and really trying to get it done. So that's why I call myself LuukDAO. I consider myself some sort of a DAO that's autonomous, but also trying to organize stuff. And yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I love the combo, like business but also philosophy, so you don't like go into that side of business which is all about maximizing profit only without caring about anything else. So yeah, I really like that. For a long time.
yeah, for quite a long time now, I would say. So back in the days, like 2000, early 16, I started hearing about crypto first. I have a cousin who's like an old school day trader, like 2013, 14. He was already full time Bitcoining and what so. At some point when I was, I think, like 20 or 21, he approached me and said, "Hey, I think you're old enough now to dive into this." Introduced me to crypto trading. That was fun, but I wanted more. So I started reading a white paper a day just to get up to speed with all the things. These were like old school white papers, like IOTA and shares, kind of the older stuff. Eventually started a organization from the Netherlands called the Caribbean Blockchain Alliance, together with some, you could even call it kind of university friends that also came from the Caribbean, already with the intention to leverage kind of the capabilities of blockchain, the transparency, the efficiency, the decentralization, bringing it to the Caribbean region, specifically because the region is quite underdeveloped when it comes to infrastructure and also when it comes to, let's call it, a ethical culture. There's a lot of kind of deals that happen under the table, and it comes back to bite, especially those that, like the poorest people, get hit hardest with those kind of deals, where public money would disappear, where just a lot of friction and things that we saw potentially blockchain could help change just by bringing more transparency and fairness. That eventually led us to doing interviews, and we interviewed Patrick Rawson from DAOstack, who is now a good friend of mine, and he explained what they were trying to build at DAOstack. And ever since that day, we went down the rabbit hole. We started participating in Genesis Alpha, which was the first, I'd say, first functional DAO, maybe even at least the first DAO from DAOstack that was live, I think, already somewhere early 2018. We had an actual DAO and it ran, and there was money being thrown in, and it gave us a lot of room to experiment with things like on chain voting, forum discussions, proposal writing, discussion, feedback, like all the things that comes with DAOing. And yeah, that really started our trajectory. So from there, we started doing a research in the potential for decentralized governance for specifically Curacao. That we then turned into an open innovation event on the island, which later led to the creation of CuraDAO, which is the social impact DAO that we started. I think we can go deeper into that in a bit, but that's still evolving. And so it's kind of my appetite for participating and creating DAOs. Right now, I'm primarily involved in PrimeDAO, some sort of a strategic lead, involved in the DAOist, which is a movement that we co started, and then the Kolectivo project, which is an extension of CuraDAO and CuraDAO. So beyond the CuraDAO social impact DAO, we also at some point created the CuraDAO, a stablecoin for the island of Curacao that was leveraging DAI. This was like super early DeFi, like early 2000, uh, like late 2019. We worked on this, and it's still being used by a couple hundred community members now. But now we're transitioning away from these kind of simple monotheistic kind of designs where it's just one thing to turning it into more of a service or a platform, a solution that is more circular, more kind of holistic in its approach.
And the currency that you made is as it works like sort of like the grassroots economics, kind of the way they set it up.
Yes, so the initial CuraDAO was a very simple design. So the currency of Curacao is already pegged to the dollar at a fixed rate. So it was super easy to replicate. You just lock an amount of DAI in a smart contract, and that then allows you to mint some CuraDAO at kind of the same valuation as the local currency. We realized that that model, because it's fully collateralized, so for every CuraDAO in circulation, there needs to be that same amount worth of DAI in a vault, that it's quite inefficient. So our economy, our main goal is to create well-being for the people on the island, and therefore we need resources. But if for every, let's say, guilder spent, we need to attract a dollar, it's going to be really hard and inefficient. So that's where we started working with Will Ruddock from Grassroots Economics. We actually sent someone from Curaçao there twice already. He's still there now, called Roland. He's a food forest specialist who's helping them also set up food forests now in Kenya. But their design is much more interesting because they have under collateralized community currencies that don't need 100% collateral to.
Okay, so you have 100% currently.
So at this point, yes. But in the kind of the design that we're moving towards, kind of step one is just completely backed by whatever asset. Just have it in a hard asset and have it run and have it have value. Then step two is I think the model that Will is using right now, where it's kind of under collateralized. So you have some collateral, but you also have some more mechanics that allow for the reserve to be under collateralized. So in his case, it's 25%. And there's some sort of an arbitrage opportunity where if there's under 25% in the collateral, you can swap the local currency for the community currency at a cheaper rate, and the other way around, where it kind of creates this dynamic where it's kind of a self-fixing system without needing 100% back. Now, the design that we're moving towards with Kolectivo, by the way, means collective in the Papiamento, in the local language of Curacao. The intention is to create a local regenerative economy that is not only that is less generalized, and it's also should be controlled by the local people. So it's a stack that we're trying to develop primarily together with design partners like CurveLab, Cello, Fuse, to work out a system where any local community can get not just a currency that works with them, but a full economic suite that they can control. So that there's no outside force telling, oh, you need to value it this way or this is how it works. They get the full control on their own parameters, which is a couple steps further than just saying, oh, this is the function and this is how it works and we decide how it works. It also takes a lot more work. And then the other, I think, crucial part in this design of Kolectivo is that we're integrating the DAO like natively. The whole concept of this design is to almost similar to like a central bank and a government have a way to create the money, but also a way to spend it as effective as possible for the public good. So attaching right now, we're doing the first wave of official grants where we're going to measure the impact kind of from start to finish. So we can also feedback that back and potentially try to learn which type of grants work, which type of funding is effective on the longer term. And the next step in that is that we're attempting to create this regenerative economy. So not just sustaining the level of well-being that we have now, but actually increasing and regenerating the quality of life and regenerating nature and not just keeping it at the level that it is now, because the level now is just not sufficient. And in this kind of design, what we're trying to optimize for is local capital assets. So natural assets such as, I think the best example is the food forest that we're doing. We have one official Kolectivo food forest now that we crowdfunded with an NFT. A food forest is essentially a farm that is optimized through diversity. So you plant different things in combination. It's almost like creating a jungle. And because these systems, like these plants, support each other, the soil becomes more resilient, and you don't have to give it as much water, for example, which was always a problem in our island. because water is extremely expensive and scarce there. So this design is something specifically there. Right now, it may be just a empty plot. By investing the community currency, we can get people to work it, to plant it, to make it into a food forest. This creates fruits and vegetables for the local population. It creates this kind of uninhabitable environment, turns it into like a green jungle. It even does CO2 sequestration and everything. And it's very clear that every food forest only enhances the capabilities of the system even more. It's not that it keeps it at the same level. It improves the quality of life. It improves the kind of livelihood of the ecosystem. And what we're trying to do is to tokenize these type of assets. And then the final piece is taking these tokenized local capital assets and using that in the collateral instead of an outside quote unquote hard money. Where at potentially at the start of a Kolectivo instance. So that is really how at least how we hope it develops. Is you would have Kolectivo Curaçao, but maybe also Kolectivo Barbados or Kolectivo Northern Netherlands or whatever. You would start first with primarily being backed by a general global currency. Let's say ETH. You would be backed primarily by ETH at the start. But as your local community matures and grows, slowly the treasury will consist, like the vault will consist more of local assets. Things like local education programs, local forests, local things that your community specifically values a lot and will continue to value at some sort of a stable rate to then create these local kind of regenerative currencies. And there are a couple of projects that are doing similar, or at least that are a couple steps further already in their kind of regenerative economy design, primarily region networks and seeds. But I think where they're different is that we are doing it with a very specific regional focus, where we say this community currency is specifically for this area and for the people and beings that live there, and making a generalizable framework that can be copied across different places, but with their own parameters and their own incentives and their own marketing campaigns and their own kind of approaches and languages. Kind of in traditional business, it's like think global, act local, kind of that ridiculous, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Because economies are a lot about value. What do you value? And it's almost impossible to find the same value across the globe because people in Curacao may value things very differently from people in Costa Rica, maybe. And therefore, I think that this local kind of culture first approach, where you try to embed the local culture and norms and values and let them run with it instead of saying, oh, this is the general reward for action A or B, or this is how we value carbon sequestration, or this is how we. I think I'm not arguing that this is a better design. I just think that this is an exciting design that I'm super eager to explore. Also, because maybe going a bit back, I think my main kind of target audience with Kolectivo is specifically the younger generation that are oftentimes jobless in Curacao. I think it's about 40% of the youth is unemployed. And giving them an option to say, either I'm going to try to study for something and get like a normal job, or I'm going to learn while doing, while being part of Collectivo, participating in grants, in projects, in committees, and like there's a lot you can learn from participating in things like a DAO and creating like local DAOs that do specific things, like from beach cleanups to organizing children education programs to also maybe larger things, starting an innovation center or a whatever. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're trying to achieve, and maybe I went already too far, so I'm super curious also to hear kind of where you want to go next.
I really love it. Like I think I absolutely agree that like there's not going to be like one token to for all of that. I mean, it's useful for like getting started, kickstarting these sort of local initiatives. But yeah, I think I agree that like the future is in like having a lot of these local tokenized systems. I really love the idea of like under collateralized currency backed by like DAI, because yeah, it allows the local economy to flow, because like people want to do things and they have things that they want to exchange with each other, but they need a way to account for those exchanges, and like you don't need like backed one by one with dollar to do that. But like actually tokenizing local resources, that's the next step, like after having those kinds of currency, that's for sure. But yeah, let's I guess take a step back into like how you even started. I mean, you already kind of went through it, I guess. But yeah, back to when you started CuraDAO. What I love about it is that like Curaçao is a pretty small country, so it's possible to make a big impact, like if you really try. So that's what I love about it.
Definitely. And maybe I can share a couple fun stories there. So we only have about 175,000 people living there. The island is relatively small, I think like 60 kilometers long and like 8 kilometers wide. So it's really like you can drive it in like 45 minutes. But we have a very friendly supermarket called Esperamos that has two big supermarkets across the island, one on the left side and one on the right side. And they already accept both Bitcoin and CuraDAO, which basically means that anyone in Curaçao with CuraDAO can already do their groceries. It's sufficiently big for anyone to do it. So even to be more concrete, so somehow I got my mom involved in this as well. She's also all into CuraDAO and helping with projects and what so. And now for a new project, we needed oh no, we needed to buy a cake for someone out of her family. And it ended up that Esperamos was the only place that sold the cake, and my mom can literally go there and pay with her Curadai to get the cake for my aunt. Which, like, for me, like it's the small things, but for me, there was like a wow moment. The fact that she's helping create food forest, and then some people are willing to accept this crazy currency that allows my mom to buy a cake for someone that maybe she wouldn't ever buy because it's maybe a little bit too expensive or too. She's like, I'm not gonna spend like $30 on a cake, but maybe if it's something that she earned for doing good and she earned like an extra, that she'd feel more happy about it. So it's getting to a point. I think we now have about 22 places that accept Kuradai, but it's getting to a point that on like a day-to-day life, I could actually start using it for things like this. And there's still a couple small kind of extra stores that we would need to cover kind of the full spectrum. A hardware store is one of them. We really want a hardware store to accept Kuradai. But then we're hopefully going to get to a point where contributors don't need to even want to cash out. They would just stay in Kuradai and keep circulating the currency. And that's really where the kind of extra value comes, because then every guilder in the system doesn't just create one transaction, but it creates maybe 5 or 10 or 50. And that's kind of the velocity of the money. So yeah, that's happening in Curacao, and it also relates really well to this idea of Kolectivo of being kind of focused on a specific geographic location. We're researching together with Astro Protocol to see if we can do geospatial impact mapping. So that is mapping a specific area in the world. It could be either physical or digital, I assume. You could also do it, I guess, digital, but specifically physical. Saying, hey, we're going to take this coral reef, this area, and we're going to measure the impact that's created there. And you could even tokenize that area, for example. I know that this is something that they're doing in Mexico already, where you could put sensors that measure the speed of the water. And if it goes above a certain level, that is generally a sign that the coral reef is getting damaged. And that would automatically transfer funds to organizations that are taking care of these kind of things. So it's really going as much as like a step way further than how we do like public goods management now, where you would maybe have a government that has a ministry that has like three dudes that maybe care about coral, and then every 6 months they randomly go in the water to see if there's something that needs to be changed, and then you write five proposals to like four people, and then maybe a year later it gets fixed. Where here we use data and kind of commons work basically to just make these feedback loops way smaller and way more efficient. Another thing that I think there's a lot of room for is, for example, road management. There's a lot of holes in the road in Curacao. Of course, you don't want everyone to go fill holes because that would be kind of irresponsible. But what I think would be epic is to create some sort of a micro course that anyone can take with basic equipment that anyone could learn how to use. And then some specific degree of holes, I would love to just see the population fill them up in the right way, of course. But I don't think we need this kind of super big hierarchy for something as simple as filling a hole, where now you have like a full ministry with like, again, a whole structure to do a relatively simple task.
That's a very cool idea. I had a somewhat similar idea about like also a geo application where people like take a picture of like a pile of trash that's inside the forest, and then other people see that picture on their map, and they're like, okay, I don't like that, just put in like $5, and then more people see it, everybody puts in a few dollars, and it like manages itself.
So that's actually something we can do, or that I hope we can do soon. So there's this app in Curacao. I think it's called 211 or 311. It's an app where you can signal kind of where trash is or where that animal is laying or where that already exists. What we just need to build on top of it is kind of this incentive structure saying, oh, whoever does this and sends proof to this gets 10 CuraDAO, 100 CuraDAO. I mean, there's so much that can be done. So yeah, those are definitely things that I think we'll see get more like happen more and more. But maybe I mean I've been talking really positive so far in this chat, but I think there's also a couple of big kind of hurdles that we still need to take to potentially get there. One of the first ones is the fact that it's nearly impossible to transfer crypto to fiat on the island because of our traditional banking infrastructure that's highly limited. It's we need correspondent banks, so American banks to interface with to do international transactions, and anything that it's only remotely risky, they say no, you cannot do that. So what we end up with is a community that is our economy has been shrinking for the past 10 years. We're down like 30% over the past 10 years. Unemployment is like 30 something percent as well. We're in a really bad spot, but even there we're not getting the resources that we would need. Like we're not getting the resource to reinvest because we're being limited by all sorts of regulations and rules, and especially the fact that we cannot do crypto to fiat conversion in like a simple way is making the project Kolectivo much harder because either we need to step up and try to set up a regional exchange or kind of go really deep in bed with the regulators to try to figure this out, or we need to build without them. But I truly think that that's also not the right approach because then you're already excluding kind of half of the citizens and saying, oh no, because you work for the government or because you do this, or we cannot work with you, which is a really big challenge. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge now is kind of the legal and kind of financial limitations or uncertainty even that we have, which is kind of stopping us to for potentially, for example, raise funds for Collectivo to take it to a very serious level, like a global. There are just some small hurdles that we still need to solve locally as well.
And hopefully, but yeah, hopefully it will be easier to solve when it's like a small place and people are easy to reach. And
Yeah, for sure.
have you already been in touch with the like local regulators or the government? Or
Yeah, for sure. So it's quite funny. So there was this day where I got a message from from like a collaborator that hey, we got a message from the central bank in the CuraDAO email. I'm like, okay, let's open it up. It was an invitation to give feedback on their digital asset framework, and they also mentioned CuraDAO in there as a positive development, which was a really good sign. That digital asset framework is still kind of in review, I believe, but so far no negative things at least. But it's also with any institution it's going to take very long to get to whatever agreement. So it's something that will need to have a lot of resources locally as well. Like we need to have a guy or a lady or whoever on the island that they can talk to and that they can go to and see a real face. And luckily we have that now. We started building up a team with Collectivo Labs, which I've been building up for the past say 6 7 months, and now we're finally in the spot where we can also hire a couple people on the ground and have like a formal base in Curacao. Actually, today is the first time that we have the Dutch group of Collectivo Labs together in the Netherlands. So we have 7 people here today, and there are also kind of 5 people in Curacao, and it's really exciting to finally see this group growing and really having some heavy hitters involved, people that can actually have conversations with the banks and people that can carry grant programs and people that can understand like food forests and tokenization and those things. But it just takes, I think it is kind of my reflection from being involved in DAOs for a little bit of time now. It just takes a lot of time to build something, and then the retention is always also a challenge. Like you can, even if you build something and it explodes, it's super important to have the systems there to keep people happy so that they can stay there. And one big thing there was just giving people the assurance that they can pay their bills, which is something that we kind of neglected early on. We were like, oh, it's volunteer, we're changing the world, we're that's all fun and all, but if you have children to take care of, or if you have like it's really important to have funding. And maybe this is something that I kind of underestimated early on. I've done a bunch of things for DAOs for like $100 here and like, which is really fun early on. But from a DAO's perspective as well, you need to be able to empower your contributors for the longer run. It's not just, hey, here, get some scrap money, do some weird things. Just I understand that the freedom in DAOs is great and you can do whatever you like almost. But then also oftentimes the rewards are kind of yeah, which is something we're trying to standardize more and more, not just for Collectivo Labs and their project in Curacao, but also for all the other DAOs that I'm involved in, such as PrimeDAO and also Balanced Grants Committee. It's really a lot of streamlining and tinkering on how, yeah, we can grow this out in a way that retains the people and keeps them happy. Because in the end, the DAOs are just serving the people and not the other way around.
I think this is a great point. Like when I was starting metagame, I also wanted to take this extreme approach. Like I really didn't want to raise any funds. I wanted to attract as many like people who would be like missionaries and not be like here for the money. And it's been working. Like people have been contributing and more people joining. But yeah, like the turnout, the churn rate, and also the main problem is like people come, people contribute, but they can't really like contribute a meaningful amount of time, like because they still need to like work for real money to feed their families. Yeah, so that's definitely a huge problem.
And that's, I think, my mission with Kolectivo Labs and all the organization I'm involved in. I want to empower as many people as possible to be able to find that kind of perfect fit where they are doing something that they really enjoy, but they're also able to make a living and contribute meaningfully to whatever ecosystem, whether it's PrimeDAO, Collectivo, Balancer. I don't even care whether it's metagame. If people, like, the more people that find that fit, I think the more chance we have that this alternative kind of economic game that we're playing is going to play out. Because in the end, it all relies on livelihood. If we can provide more livelihood to people, they'll come here and they'll play our games, our weird DAO things, and structurelessness and whatever. But if those systems are not able to provide a shelter and food and love and everything that a person needs, then they're never gonna leave their kind of comfortable 9 to 5. It gives them anything that they need from, yeah. I think it's something that we need to be more serious about as DAOs. Also things like pensions and retirement and health insurance, and it's things that maybe, I mean, I'm pretty young. I've never really experienced those things in depth, but I'm starting to think more and more about this because there will be a point that maybe one of our contributors breaks his arm and can't work for 2 months. Then what do we do? Are we just going to tell the dude, like, oh, yeah, suck it? You're just DAO, you're not contributing, you're not getting money? Or do we have some sort of a support structure? But I think we're super early still with DAOs, but those are the questions that are kind of in the back of my mind already now. As I think it's good to start with these things early and start thinking about it.
We actually have this kind of thing in metagame, like because the way source code works, there's like a slow payout and fast payout. So like you get 70% of what you need to get, and then like when you have to leave, so people have to leave for a month or two, they still like what accrues, they still get paid. So that's good. But yeah, in general, we definitely need to work harder on making all these DAO positions better paid. Like people are willing to work for like less than market rate if they're working on something meaningful. But yeah, it can be like for nothing, and it shouldn't be like a 80% difference.
Yeah, and I think there we need to flip the question around is, do you as a DAO want to underpay these people that are contributing meaningfully, are valuable, are making these decisions to leave other opportunities for your DAO? And I think most oftentimes, if you have the resources, I would say never do that. Because what we're seeing in a lot of, like, especially the bigger DAOs now that they have like 2, 3, maybe 4 digit millions, which, I mean, in this environment that changes extremely fast. Like 2 years ago, there was no DeFi. A year ago, NFTs were just like a technology standard. I don't think we're in a place where we can just say, oh, this is the market average. We're gonna pay you a little bit less because we're DAO. And then I think we as DAOs in general should be rewarding extremely well to those that contribute meaningfully, and those that, and kind of from an investment perspective, if you're an investor and you truly understand, or maybe again, maybe not truly understand, but the way I see DAOs is that they're all competing for kind of the same, almost similar pool of contributors, and there are different reasons to why you or me or whoever else would work for specific DAOs. And most of the times, it's like you said, it's either like an internal motivation of, hey, I want to change the world and build the best games and build the best game economics and whatever. But there's also a lot of other things, including kind of advantages that traditional businesses have worked out extremely well. They'll give you an offer that you just can't refuse. You're going to look at your wife and you're going to see like a beautiful future, and you're just going to be trapped in the system forever. Now, I think the DAOs that are really trying to make a difference when it comes to top talent, they should be paying extremely well. and making sure that this is worth it, especially for people that have like a good paying Web2 job. Like to get them across this ridge, it's we're gonna have to be more serious and sometimes take out the big guns because I think the next coming years are gonna be super crucial, where either we go down again to becoming somewhat Web2 like systems again, where again it's like some sort of a centralized. I'm not saying that centralization is always bad, but I think that if we truly want these open network organizations like the way I see DAOs, then we as an industry should just make sure that we become more attractive for new talent. I think somewhat NFTs are doing that because it's so fun and people like those fun things and then they stick around. But like I mentioned, I think better rewards, more advantages like some sort of assurance or some sort of a free education or whatever, I think that's really needed. And of course, community, like being part of a like minded community is on itself very valuable already.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like we should even be paying them more than the market rate because we can't provide all those other benefits like the health insurance, the pension, and all that. But yeah, for that, I need to go into fundraising mode. So that's what I'll be doing over the next month or two. Okay, but yes, so you're in Netherlands now,
Yeah, correct.
and you're kind of in Curaçao and Netherlands, like traveling in between or based.
Yeah, so most of my family still lives there. So I'm there at least twice a year, most of the times. And then now we also have a small team there. So I don't even have to be there physically, but it's really good to be there. Like I love being there. One day we'll throw a big DAO event there, and I'll invite all of you. You're gonna have a blast. Like the oceans are extremely clear, the food is great, the parties at the beach are amazing. Highly recommend visiting someday. But I'll give you all a reason to come. Trust me. But yeah, I'm mainly based in the Netherlands because the Curacao used to be or somewhat is still a Dutch colony. So we also have a Dutch passport, and it's just quite easy for people from the Dutch Caribbean to come to the Netherlands.
And what else keeps you in the Netherlands?
Stability, I would say. Stable infrastructure, I really appreciate it a lot. And maybe some kind of Western people would take it for granted, but we would have electricity outage maybe once or twice a month. Of course, you can buy a generator, you can do this, but most people don't have that. The internet here in the Netherlands is reliable, fast, cheap. It's really important for me. It's kind of my blood to keep working. So also the amount of talent in the Netherlands, I would say, is relatively high. It's a quite a forward-thinking nation with good development and good staff people. So yeah, the predictability of knowing for sure that when I wake up and I'm gonna sit behind my PC, that I can safely move in the metaverse, let's say, without having to physically do other things to kind of protect that zone.
And you can actually sell crypto.
Exactly. And you can actually do like normal. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of benefit, and I also work at a small DeFi fund here in the Netherlands. I support there. So once a week, I'm in the stock exchange in Amsterdam, which is also, I think, a cool addition just to kind of see the other side of things sometimes and also help there. So yeah, I think the Netherlands is also just a really good home base. I think the Caribbean islands are great, kind of, I wouldn't say getaways, but like second homes. But when it comes to also like conferences and what's, I think Europe is pretty dope place to be.
But say like you made the Kolectivo Labs has grown like 5 times, and you made a lot of money in crypto. Would you consider moving to back to Curacao and like really trying to push both the infrastructure, the electricity, internet, like making really?
Yes, and this is a question that I'm asking myself more and more as the industry is maturing. My main focus still now is to help PrimeDAO build the kind of technical needs that we still have as an industry, because for Collectivo to build these things is almost impossible. Those are much bigger challenges that need to be solved first. Let's say if we would have multiple instances of Collectivo, how would they ever govern things or invest together or collaborate? It's those are still frameworks that don't exist. So PrimeDAO is a DAO developer collective that's trying to build some sort of a DAO service hub, and we're doing things like joint venture formation, token swaps, building a completely decentralized launchpad, a kind of decentralized research arm, and really building the fundamental building blocks that need to be figured out before we can really use these things in the real world. So I think that the next at least kind of 3 to 5 years is still a lot of infrastructure building, and optimizing the technology. It's just now that layer twos are finally around the corner and we can actually use them, and um, it helps a lot. But like, there's only so much we can do underground now with the current infrastructure and current technology. But the end goal is that I would be able to, at some point, maybe 5 or like 8 years down the road or something, only work in the Kolectivo economy or become like a global Kolectivo citizen. That I could work when I'm in Curaçao, I'm part of Kolectivo Curaçao, and I work whatever the locality needs. When I'm in the Netherlands, maybe there's a different version of me where I'm doing different things and I'm wearing kind of multiple hats, which I think comes really close to what DAOs allow you to do, which was something that wasn't allowed before. And that's wearing multiple hats and being different versions of yourself when you're with different people or doing different things. Just to give you a good example, and I think you yourself are a good example, where there are a lot of people that have multiple interests and multiple talents and multiple desires, and traditionally you would be all into one organization that kind of shapes you to its liking, and now you can be part of multiple things and contribute there meaningfully. So my end goal is that I could maybe on Monday help with a food forest, on Tuesday do a strategy meeting with the global Kolectivo finance DAO, on Wednesday do a DAO to DAO agreement between two organizations, and then on Thursday take a day off, and on Friday again do a podcast with someone in with a DAOist. Or and that really is my that for me is kind of retirement, where I can, where these ecosystems work in a way that I don't have to be expanding them, but I can just participate in them. Yeah, I think that would be, and I think that comes somewhat close to what you're doing as well with metagame, where I mean, you reach the goal of metagame where you can just play the metagame and enjoy the metagame and not have to build the metagame. If I'm correct.
Yeah, that's pretty much you described what I want to be doing as well. Like to be able to make myself not needed in metagame as much, and then I can actually play metagame. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you can just play the game and enjoy the game. Yeah, so I think that's, then we have similar end goals. And for me, I hope to be more physical. I think metaverse and VR and everything, it's really cool. But in the end, I think I get more satisfaction out of physical interactions, moving my physical body, eating healthy physically, and working out. Like, that's the me that I enjoy more. And therefore, kind of Collectivo is for me, I think, the end game where we can make an economy where your positive contributions to your environment are rewarded fairly, where you know that the system is honest and at the benefit of everyone, and that you're also taken care of for some extent. So you know that you're going to eat regardless. You know you're going to be able to move from point A to point B, either with a shared car or a shared vehicle or public transport or whatever. I think that's the world that I'm dreaming of, and I don't think it's very unlikely that we'll get there. If you just look at kind of the pace of innovation, I was just watching an iRobot video yesterday, the thing that Tesla's doing, and I mean, we're going into a strange age regardless. Even if you strip away all the blockchain and crypto, like, the financial system is at a weird point. The global economy is at a weird point. We're really transitioning now towards becoming digital societies. And I'm quite optimistic. And I think we all have to be optimistic. I would even say that's kind of the top thing to be valuable in anything, especially in DAOs, is being optimistic about the concept and just working with it instead of kind of seeing all the bad things.
I'm not eating so healthy yet, but I'm definitely more about the physical. I will see myself in the future building more things in the physical world, and like VR. VR doesn't really like excite me. And there's definitely like a lot of bad sides to crypto, like all the speculation, like the casino, and like people spending millions on things that like don't really produce value in the real world, and like yeah, all of these plutocracy DAOs and things like that. But I'm, yeah, definitely still super optimistic about the whole space and where we are going.
Nice, yeah. Then we share that excitement. Any final things you want to chat about? DAO related, Prime related, finance, Collectivo, anything?
Kind of. So I had this, the I sent you the list of topics in the invitation, but I didn't really ask you these questions, but we still went through them like naturally, just.
Yeah, it flew automatically.
uh, I do actually want to ask you more about PrimeDAO. Like, how did that start?
Yeah, so that's actually a really, I'd say, an exciting story. And The cool thing about where I'm now in my life is that it's all extensions of previous things. So I'm doing everything that came kind of out of previous desires already, and they just evolved. So during kind of the end of like the start of CuraDAO, I also co-founded FestDAO together with Felipe Duarte. We did maybe a note before all of this. I also used to organize blockchain events in the Netherlands under blockchain talks. So I had some sort of like 15, 20 events under my name that I already organized. So when I connected with Felipe Duarte, who was back then part of DAOstack, we started working on DAOfest. I think what we achieved, which was about 30 events across like 7 or 8 countries in 4 months, I think it was insane. All coordinated through a DAO with a really cool reputation and voting system and reward system, and it worked. That led to us having a big pre-event at eDenver in 20. Wow, this was 2020, but it feels like 5 years ago. But it was early 2020. And here it was already becoming clear that DeFi was going to be the next big thing. DAOs were like people spoke about them, but like the highlights were like people making jokes about Aave and this and that. Like it was quite apparent that DeFi was going to be the big thing. And physical events kind of stopped after that because of COVID. But it was already kind of coming to some sort of an end. So we were looking for ways to contribute our DAO experience meaningfully to the DeFi space. Back then, we already had like 1 year, 1.5 years of DAO experience. Felipe also went in the whole Meta Cartel Moloch DAO thing. I think you also grew up there. So we wanted to contribute because we saw these things like Kyber and what so emerge without much of governance, at least back then. Now it's all so much better. But so in this, we started having conversations with a lot of DeFi protocols, including Kyber and what so. And eventually, I randomly met up with David, who's the founder of Toddle. They're one of the first DEX aggregators, who apparently also has connections to Curaçao. It was like instant flow, and we started brainstorming about what a DeFi DAO should look like. We started continuing kind of the evaluation of that, and eventually I got Curve Labs involved. They're a Berlin-based dev company, cybernetics company, led by Patrick Rawson and Cem. Pat is ex DAOstack, Cem is ex Aragon Black, so they also were like super relevant people. We started brainstorming together on kind of what would a initially a DEX aggregator DAO look like, and eventually this evolved into like a liquidity DAO. And then we came to the idea like, hey, why only liquidity? Why don't we want to make end-to-end value transfer better and more accessible and more safe? And that's where we came with the idea Prime, and the name just sounded so nice, and we're like, hey, this is the thing. So we soft launched around end of 2020. We got the first group of stakeholders together. We did a small Mazer raise, mainly internally. We raised about 700K, from which I think half of that was from the internal contributors, so the people that actually ended up building. And we started working on building DeFi primitives that would make DeFi more accessible and collaborative. Initially, we thought a DAO controlled router was the way to go. Not soon after, 1inch went to the full DAO route and made their aggregator DAO governable. So it kind of was like, hey, it works for them, but it also didn't kind of reach the, at least from my perspective, it didn't reach the kind of the DAO experience that I was used to with like working groups and contributor guidelines and all those things. This was much more like an application governance system. So we continue to iterate, and the nice thing in PrimeDAO is that we are not just one group of people with all the same objectives. We are a collective of different builder groups. So there's a lot of iteration and justification and kind of finding things out together, opposed to one person saying, "Oh, follow me because I'm the leader of this company" or whatever. It's much more of kind of a pushing and pulling game between the different stakeholders, kind of where we need to go, how to prioritize, and what so. In that, we started to realize that our biggest value add is specifically in the DAO domain, making DeFi work better for DAOs. So what we started moving towards is much more of becoming a service provider DAO, building tools that are kind of DAO governed, hopefully more accessible and more safe, but primarily with this bigger vision of allowing DAO to DAO interactions and therefore improving the efficiency in the industry, creating some sort of a positive sum game where instead of 5 protocols all doing indexes on themselves, hopefully seeing some of these parties merge together, work together, share resources together, much more open learning, open sharing, which is kind of our longer term goal. So recently we went into this relaunch phase. We just concluded a seed round, so we're getting on new stakeholders, relaunching our token. So we had a small early token out, which was quite illiquid. We only had like 3% of all the tokens out, and it wasn't really utilized that much. So relaunching everything, starting the game basically from scratch, focused on 4 products that we iterated together with primarily Common Stack, DeFi Safety, and Block Science. So with Block Science, we did a research cycle on DAO to DAO interactions, turning that into an MVP for DAO to DAO first token swaps and joint ventures. Then with DeFi Safety, we're working on our next version of Prime Rating, which is a permissionless DeFi kind of risk and quality protocol. So we already have like 80 or 90 researches done. We have, I think, 40 full scores on DeFi protocols. So what we do is we have a technical report and a fundamental report, which are permissionless, so anyone can fill them in, and then it needs to pass governance and what so. And then we aggregate the 2 scores into a letter rating, like A plus or B or whatever. And we can use this now to curate things. So the other application that we're building is Prime Launch. It's a launchpad experience on Balancer V2. So it allows you to do LBPs with a full dashboard and answering kind of a lot of questions that were big hurdles for projects before, where you needed to develop your own front end, your this and that. So now we have a dashboard for that. And then finally connecting that all together kind of to finalize the service package with some sort of a pool solution where you can stake pools for some amount of time. And there we're doing index pools, DAO to DAO pools, so a pool between 2 or multiple DAOs that want to be aligned for a longer time. And also our other pools, of course, prime tokens and locking and what so. But the intention really is that now those all those 4 things are in development, and I think 3 of them are already going to be out in the next kind of, never say timelines, but like 6 to 8 weeks. And then we want to transition this much more towards a service offering, similar that you go to Binance, or there's like a million things that you can do, and you maybe not even thinking about all the different products you're interacting with, but you just say, "Oh, I'm going to Binance," and then you're going to do all your things. So the way I envision this with Prime is specifically for people that are deep into DAOs and want to do like DAO to DAO business and what so, that you would come to PrimeDAO for all your DAO financial and like collaboration needs. You would just come and maybe make a deal with an organization or do a joint venture and launch a new project. Use the rating API to make a new investment pool or decide which investment pool you want to go into, all in the same package. So it becomes much more of like a service than product A, product B, product C, and whatever. And I think the way how, because it's a lot of things, but I think the way it can work is because we always build with others and on top of others. So we partner really close with Balancer. So we build a bunch of things on top of their infrastructure. We work with DeFi Safety, so we don't have to do all the research ourselves. And that's really kind of the embodiment of this positive sum game mindset, where we don't try to build much from scratch, but just try to connect different pieces. And that's our value add, because we connect the pieces that otherwise would not be connected.
Yeah, sounds like you're doing pretty similar to what Metagame is trying to do, except more focused on the DeFi side of things, while we are more focused on the social side of things. So that's very cool. Maybe
Yeah, that's great.
maybe you guys should join Metagame as one of the guilds as well.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So one thing that we're also doing is the DAOist, which I think is fundamentally much closer to metagame and kind of how it works and how it plays out. So I'm super open to discover how we can do collaborative initiatives, co-funding, co-creating, co. I think the DAOist event in Paris was a good example of kind of the co-creation where 7, 8 DAOs, they trusted in us. We did it together. They delivered what they had to deliver, and we did. And I'm looking super forward to more of this. And I think we've reached a state where we can also do these things now. We're all a bit more mature. We all know where we want to go and what we can provide. So I'm super stoked to go deeper into this, and yeah, make this whole DAO game more attractive to a larger majority of people than it is now. Bring more people to the DAO side.
Yeah, I've been talking to Felipe about the DAOist as well, so I love that idea as well. Yeah, so yeah, we've already been here for an hour, so it's time to wrap this up. We could, yeah, I feel like we could go on for hours, but nobody's going to listen to it then. And yeah, we can always continue this at some point. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing all this awesome work that you're doing. See ya.